All right, to break down the quarterbacks are Ryan Wilson checking in here on HQ. And Ryan, let's start with UNC Sam Howe. This is a guy that we thought would be contending for the Heisman this year. Slow start for UNC, but did show up a little bit against Pittsburgh here. But based on what you saw, did he do enough to kind of win over some of those critics we've seen this year?
Yeah, I think he did. The question, Brandon, is how much did he win in that game against Pittsburgh? Here's the thing. The first quarter, the first 4 drives for Carolina, 4 sacks. So it wasn't like Sam Howell had a lot of room to operate. That offensive line was struggling immensely for most of the game, but certainly in the first half. And it took Sam Howell a while to get his feet set. And once he did, though, here are the type of things we saw. This is a fantastic throw under pressure. He understands the fact he has to get the ball out because his offensive line is struggling. That's what you like to see. Here's another one. Pump fake. He goes deep. Catch the ball! What are you doing? But that's what NFL teams want to see from Sam Howell, the ability to play in the face of pressure, because that's what he's going to see. On the other hand, here's the other touchdown, too. We saw in the highlights. Fantastic throw. NFL teams love seeing this. On the other hand, here's what you don't want to see. You can't miss them high. You're going to get your wide receiver, hang him out to dry. You're going to get him crushed. Luckily, the wide receiver didn't get hit hard there, but those are the type of things you don't want to see as an NFL scout, GM, or coach because of the inability to get the ball to your receiver in passes that it has to happen. Here's another one. Not a bad throw, but slightly underthrown. In the NFL, it might even get intercepted. So you have to put the ball out there like we did in that last play to Josh Downs, get the ball down the 1-yard line. We didn't see that there, and those are the concerns you keep coming back with. But there's a lot of good there, Tom, to like about Sam Howe.
All right, so Kenny Pickett, of course, getting a W at 346 in those 3 touchdowns. A lot of people may not know who the senior quarterback is, but on the main stage last night, he did show up. What did we learn about him?
Kenny Pickett is solid, and he did the right thing by coming back to school last year. Brandon, he was going to be a day 3 guy all day long, and he understood that. He got better. That's what happened, and here's an example of it. Between 2 defenders in the old turkey holes, they like to call it, down to the 3-yard line. Here's some more. Kenny Pickett just slinging it deep down the field. Throws on time, hits receiver in stride. Again, all things you want to see at the next level. He's pushing the ball down the field. He's not taking the checkdowns. Fantastic throw there for the touchdown. But it's not all rainbows and unicorns, they like to say, Brandon. Rolling right, why are you throwing a 95-mile-an-hour fastball behind your running back on the screen in the most important part of the game late that set up the UNC's chance to go back and go for the game winner? They eventually tied it. But those are the type of things that gives you pause. The good news is you don't see a lot of bad from Kenny Pickett. What do we have here? That should have been intercepted. That could have given the Carolina a chance to win that game in regulation. So those are the type of things that you'll go back and double check and triple check on, whether you're a draft analyst trying to make out your mock drafts or certainly whether you're an NFL team looking for a quarterback. But a lot more good from Kenny Pickett. And I'll give Sam Howell credit. He played well last night. And you could even argue the last 2.5 quarters, Brandon, he outplayed Kenny Pickett.
Real quick, Ryan, I know this is probably the showdown we've all been looking for in the ACC, but if you had to peg one higher than the other, who's your pick?
It's Kenny Pickett right now. Sam Howell doesn't have a lot to work with. His footwork is a real issue, and that's a concern. And Kenny Pickett, his arrow's pointing up, as you like to say, based on how far he's progressed, even from last season.
All right, let's talk about something going on in Oklahoma, or maybe something that hasn't been going on. Spencer Rattler has been riding the bench. This is a guy also that was up for the Heisman as a favorite, possibly. Caleb Williams is his show now. How does that impact his draft stock if we're thinking about, 2022?
Look, if you're Spencer Rattler, I think the conversation begins with this. I need to go to another school and play football. It shouldn't be I'm coming back to Oklahoma because we know Caleb Williams is the guy. It also shouldn't be I'm going to come out in the draft. Maybe they'll ask around. I'm sure they will. His representatives about where he might get drafted. If I'm an NFL team, he's a day 3 guy for me based on the way he played this year. And that's a remarkable fall given that he was going to be guy number 1 and Sam Howell was going to be QB number 2. We're not at that point. I don't know if there's a situation, barring injury, knock on wood, where Spencer Rattler gets back on the field for Oklahoma. So he needs to be a great teammate now. And then in the offseason, find a landing spot, and there'll be plenty of teams that would love to have him in college football. And he can sling it next year like Kenny Pickett did this year. He has to be a great teammate, get his mind right in terms of being focused as a football player, and he can once again be a top 10 talent. But he has a ways to go based on how the first few months of this season has unfolded for Spencer Rattler there.
All right, so if Rattler's not in the first round this year, if we're looking at the Big 12, can you find first-round talent based on what we've seen so far?
You got to squint, Tommy. I keep calling you Tommy. Brandon. Tommy's in my head. here's the thing. So you have Breece Hall at Iowa State. He's going to be a day 2 guy, probably a running back. Running backs typically don't go in round 1. Who else do we have? We have Brock Purdy, his teammate, who was a first-round conversation guy, but he is not going to be a day 1 guy, probably not even a day 2 guy at this point. Nick Bonito at Oklahoma might be your best choice, the edge rusher. The issue is he's undersized. He needed to put on some weight during the offseason. He didn't do that. Terrell Bernard for Baylor is another guy whose name keeps coming up and who's having a pretty good season, but again, a day 2 guy. And the point of this, Brandon, is that there are no clear-cut first-round picks out of the Big 12 as we sit here, and that's a pretty crazy notion, especially given that 2 of these teams are leaving for the SEC in the future.
Ryan, of course, you've been on this since last year, heading into this year, what the picture might look like for those first-rounders coming out of the Big 12. Are you surprised that even at this point in the season, it's hard to find those guys and easily say, you know what, he's a top 10, he's a top 15, at least 25 overall? Are you surprised at that?
No, absolutely. I mean, you would think Texas would have some guys. Texas always has guys. You would think Oklahoma would have some guys. They have a long history of putting out not only quarterbacks under Lincoln Riley, but they have, even though their defense hasn't been lights out in recent years, they have defensive guys that can come and play right away in the NFL. And for that to not happen as we sit here, it's pretty mind-boggling. I don't know if coaches are concerned in the Big 12 because, as I mentioned, there's going to be some realignment going on in terms of recruiting. But maybe this is just one of those off years, and next year they'll regroup and have some guys show up. I do think the Spencer Rattler situation threw a monkey wrench in the whole plans, especially for Oklahoma, because he could have been the guy carrying the banner for the Big 12 had he had a big season. Clearly that didn't happen, and now there are certainly a lot more questions and answers, not only about Spencer Rattler as a quarterback, but also about the Big 12 in terms of where's all the talent gone, at least when it translates to moving on to the NFL as a first-round pick.
Well, like you said, we'll just have to squint and keep our eyes open a little bit. I might have to get my glasses and see how that works out for the Big 12 there. Ryan Wilson, appreciate your time as always, my friend. Taking a look, of course, at Ryan's latest mock at the top 10. Defense always trending at the top. Kayvon Thibodeau from Oregon there, Aiden Hutchinson, and then maybe tucked away down there at 6, Matt Corral, the lone QB in the top 10. This year doesn't seem like you might have some of the guys. We just saw some there with UNC and Pittsburgh, but hard to find them in that top 10 in Ryan's latest mock draft.